I've got a number of videos about forest mulching, and I want to try to answer some questions for folks. I'm going to do something a little bit different here. I'm just recording on a phone down here in the office. And so Ryan Drake asks a question. He says, very good video, looking to do the same on my 55 acres, creating walking trails and preserving the forest. He's considering having a skid steer or a tractor. Many people who watch my videos about forest mulching or creating trail systems, they want to do something similar, whether it's hunting land, whether it is eco retreat, or even a farm, and provide the trails provide access to different areas of the farm. They have similar questions. And he says he's seeing forestry mulchers in the videos. He's more interested in that because I think a lot of people realize that forestry mulchers can do this job way faster than just having somebody out there with a skid steer. See, a lot of folks will go buy a skid steer and they'll get like a mulching head, or they'll get a bulldozer head, and they'll offer themselves as land clearing, but they're not doing it the right way, and you end up with erosion. You end up with extra costs. But what he's saying is he likes my idea and he wants to go forward, but he wants to know the idea. He wants an idea of the cost per day and the links to the trails that can be built in a day. And this is fair. These are questions I had earlier, but I'm going to share with you why these questions are not as useful as the approach that we look at here at Prosperity Homestead. And then also, do the prices increase with the topology and the walkability or the steepness? And so I'm Justin Hitt with Prosperity Homestead, and again, I'm trying something a little bit different to answer these questions, because we get a lot of questions. I'm so busy here. But trails are worth the investment at any price if the trail is designed the right way. If you design the trail to give you accessibility to the land, help you with conservation and preservation areas. Like I haven't done a video out at Reynolds Homestead, but I've taken a tour several times out there. They actually have a grid trail system on level ground that was put there not by cutting away materials, but how they planted the trees in that area. And then a couple other places I've been to, we actually didn't even design the trails. We basically used LiDAR to find the hard roads that used to be there, logging trails, old historical roads, and then we just cleared them. So we basically did trail maintenance. But if you design the trails the right way, they're worth it at any price, because you won't cut a trail unless it is going to be cost effective in the long run. And then before you cut the trail, you're going to map it out and you're going to walk it and you're going to start using it however it is. So I've got 22-foot wide trails in some areas. So in general, the properties that we work with, if there's going to be bidirectional traffic, it's going to be 22 feet wide, 26 feet wide trails. If it's going to be single directional traffic, it's going to be 13-foot wide trails. If it's going to be ATV, horses, mountain bikes, it's going to be 4-foot wide trails. And if it's just going to be a human, it could be like a 3-foot or just a 2-foot wide trail, a little foot trail. And you kind of meander through the woods. Now, where do those trails go? Well, they go on contour on the piece of land. So what do we mean by contour? Contour is a level area that with water the water would spread out on the trail. Now, we don't walk on the trails within 72 hours of rain unless they're movement trails. So let's say we got a 13-foot wide road and it's accessed from the hard road to the main house or the camp or base camp. That trail is going to be designed differently than another trail that is just going to be used seasonally or for recreation. And so when he says, okay, well, what is the price per day? It depends. It really does depend, because it could depend on the size of the mulcher, the types of trees, the experience of the operator, the types of terrain. If you have very flat ground and you have just scrub brush, any forest mulcher will do, and you can go for the cheapest price. But let's say you've got 4-inch diameter softwoods. That's a different experience in time, the amount of time or speed it can take to clear off a piece of land, than if you had 4-inch hardwoods, or if you had rocky soil versus just general forest floor. Another factor is there are forest mulchers that can chop up a tree 20 inches in diameter. But if the general composition of the forest is more trees 20 inches diameter, first off, you'll be able to walk through it because the trees will be further apart. But you may want to have someone cut in a logging trail. So you're talking to a forester. You're talking to somebody who does logging. You now need to cut a trail in there so that you're going to be prepared for a future logging activity. Because when we design trails for clients, we're looking at what are you going to do with it now? What do you want to do with it in 5 years? How are we going to recover the cost of it? and then ultimately why we cut the trails in the first place. And so if you're doing an agricultural project, your trails are going to pay for themselves because you're going to cut trails in places that are going to get you access to fence lines. They're going to get you access to the property boundaries. They're going to get you access between buildings or for future water access. They're all going to be on contour trails in the majority of the cases. You may have stream crossings. That's going to impact your cost there. A forest mulcher, when they go through and just cut the trees, you do have maintenance. You just can't. They're just chipping out the trees, but the materials that fall on the ground is now a fire risk. So you have to be aware that there could, there's no smoking on the property. Could be a fire risk. You're going to have issues like the ground that they've shredded out. If it's not on contour and you start driving on it, the wood chips will get all mushy, and then you're going to end up with big old mud bog and problems like that. See, if you're running an eco retreat and you got students coming in, then you can cut your trails incrementally, or you've got people are staying there, and you can go from primitive campsite to cabins to different types of activities. If you're going to run ATVs, that's a whole different type of trail because you can have them forest mulch. But if you have your trails are not level on contour, or your movement from higher elevations to lower elevations are not clean, you're going to have people running ATVs down hills and causing big ditches and stuff. So again, none of these answers are going to be easy, not because I make everything complex. It's just because you're not, I don't know the land. So in this case, he's saying, what's my cost per day? My mentality is, how much can we afford to pay based on how we're going to use these trails? So if it's a conservation project, you may not get any money out of it. However, if it's a conservation project and is properly designed on paper, reviewed by the NCRS, which is I don't have the acronym off me, and I'm basically holding this phone with my hand here. Basically, if they're actual conservation project that's been reviewed by conservation biologists and the forestry department and whatever agencies that need to look at it, you might be able to pay whatever you got to pay to get the trails done, and then you're going to get a cost recovery on the capital expenditure associated with the land improvement. Now, if it's agricultural land, it's a different thing. If you're actually a commercial agricultural land farm, you can take those expenses out. Now, I'm not your CPA or accountant, but my brain says, what's the structure in which we're going to implement these trails? And on paper, we're going to look at that design in advance. If you're cutting trails for personal use, and you're worried about how much it's going to cost, then just put foot trails in and walk the trails enough that you can make the cuts. You still want to design it on paper so that the trails last, because even a foot trail can cause channeling on a hill. It can cause erosion issues. It can cause injury. One of the things that when we design a trail is, if they're having people use these trails and they wreck a mountain bike back there, can we get them out of the woods? So on a piece of property I've been doing a lot of videos on, every foot trail is within 250 feet of a wide trail, so a 13-foot wide trail, and every 13-foot wide trail is within 250 feet of a access road. So there's one access road that goes from the front of the property to the back of the property, where you could drive a truck, you could take an ambulance back there if you had to, and then all the other trails are within that, near there, primarily because we can drop hay for the goats, and we can drop, we can drive back there with water and things like that, and not having to have an ATV on the trail necessarily. Even though I am liking ATVs on the trail for farm use, the point being is that these are design characteristics. These are things we have to consider in the design of the trails itself. Now, if you've got a nonprofit or an eco retreat where people are coming out and paying to have access to the property, and you draw out a multi-phase plan on paper, and then this year your budget's $10,000 or $5,000, then you just have to get as much trail as you can get done so that you can start generating revenue to have your guests finance the trail. Okay? Because that's really what it's about. If you've got walkability issues and hills and slopes and those types of things, you may want to focus on the fire breaks first. Sometimes fire breaks just go right straight down the hill, but you're preserving the overall forest and the ecology of the space. You can always cut a zigzag later of foot trails to get more use out of the trails itself. See, the woods don't need the trails. Now, you are increasing the amount of edges in a forest, which if you have hunting land, those edges will actually increase the amount of fodder that's available for deer and the underbrush available for turkey. And if you've got quail or you want to get quail up and going, a nice big wide 64-foot wide, looks like they would put a power line down it, might be a better case, and have them timber in strips because you're going to get quail habitat. These things just come in by your design. So when you're working with me, if I'm doing a consulting project with you, I'm going to ask so many more questions that have nothing to do with the price of the project, because we could probably get into whatever your budget is. Because again, if you're asking about the price, then maybe you can't afford it, or you have concerns about affording it. Now, in this case, what I think he's asking is if they give me a price of $2,000 a day or $20,000 a day, what am I getting out of that? And by the way, I've had a 25-ton excavator on site for $2,000 a day. I've had a forest mulcher on site for $2,000 a day. With inflation, who knows what the price is going to be, but it's what is that person doing when they're on the property? What is the value of what they're doing? I will not bring somebody on a site unless I'm getting 4 to 5 times the value back. So if they come in and they're cutting trails on the property, they're cutting the trails because for every dollar I spend with them, I'm getting back $3, $4, $5 in return. So for an agricultural property, when I'm consulting over there, it's what do we need cut so that you can get to livestock, or you can have a cattle trail, or so it makes it easier to install fencing, or so that you can get water from one location to another. When we have a recreational location, what are we putting in? Like, how are people going to use this land, and how are we going to conserve this land? If we're putting in an equestrian trails, that's going to be very similar to ATVs. They have similar impact on the land. We need enough trails that we can close down trails for maintenance, and so that we don't have constant compaction on the trails, because that compacted trail is going to move water faster than a trail that's a little bit porous. Some people want to put rocks on the trails. Now, I have not been the primary on designing trails for like city trails and things. I've been in the peripherals for that kind of thing. But I hear a lot of people, they want to put gravel on the trails. Where if you have an accessibility issue and you want people to be able to access it with mobilized wheelchairs or walking, and you have a bunch of gravel on that trail, it can be harder to use the trail. I've seen some really nice trails for bikes that put in actually wood chips throughout the woods, and they didn't consider the having to haul the wood chips out on 8 to 10 miles of trail. So there's this particular trail on Hampton Roads that goes around a pond, and they put wood chips on most of the trail around the pond, because it's a nice surface. It's environmentally friendly. It looks similar to the wood chips that were down there when they forest mulched some of the trail, but it was so hard to maintain because you had to haul wood chips for 6 or 7 miles before you can get to certain parts of the trail. Now the trail's 8 foot around so there's an 8-foot loop around the pond, and then it had little clover leaves off of it so you can get a little bit more distance in it. So they could, if it's a loop, they can go in on either side. However, with all these little loops and everything, they ended up just putting mulch around the pond itself, because otherwise it's just all these tangents. You have factors about temperature, rainfall, other factors like that. So again, walking trails can certainly be footpaths to start. You can figure out what the contour line is, walk that contour line, put some transitions between places, put some simple bridge crossings, or even a single narrow crossing across a waterway. And you can start doing that right now. You can start doing it. Doesn't matter how much it costs for a forest mulcher, you can start doing that right now. Maybe you're just going to focus the forest mulching on where people are going to park their cars, or on a campground area, campsite. Now, there are small flail mowers if you have just brush. But again, if the trees are large enough, then you should be able to walk between the trees, and you go from a 2-foot wide walking path to a 4-foot wide ATV or horse trail to a 13-foot wide vehicle trail, and these are all the same footprint in the property, because you don't want to have to come out and fix a lot of erosion issues. If something is gone from foot traffic to horse traffic, and you didn't design the trail right in the first place, then the horse is just going to blow out your trail. It's just the way it is. Now, with horse trails, you may have little nooks that are near a main road, so you can have hay, you can have resting areas. The particular property that I've shown you lately, we had designed it originally for people who are training pack goats, donkeys, or horses, because we have people come through with horses all the time, and it would be a great place to rest the horses. And if they called ahead, we'd have hay ready for them because I'm already buying hay for the goats, and we would have along the place to camp. Now, this is not a large property, but along the place to camp, they would have places that they could hike. They could exercise the horses around the trails and then easily get from the trail to the main road or a nook or a campsite, and then have hay available and have a small portable corral set up or something like that. So again, how are you going to use the land? What's the terrain of the land? What's the composition of trees? How do you want to how do you want to travel across the land? He says he's got 55 acres of wooded land. At a minimum, clear your perimeter, because if you ever want to put up fencing and you have a nice clear perimeter, you'll be good to go. Another thing too is when you clear the perimeter, you'll very often find contour lines to connect from one side of the property to another, and then you can come back another year and you can cut those contour lines. But again, what is your budget? What is your budget? And then finally, again, my brain is, how do we recover the investment we've put into conservation? If we're going to conserve these forests, if we're going to create wildlife habitat, if we're going to produce environments where we can enjoy it as a family, whether it's a family retreat area, whether it is a hunting camp, whether it is an eco-tourism location or a permaculture design or demonstration center, or even a working farm, how are we going to progress into our final design? So when we look at these projects, I am doing a design plan first, and it might just cover the access. We're going to do access, we're going to do water, we're going to do use and crops, because what are we conserving, right? If you got a bunch of oak trees out there and we're conserving the oak trees, like a white oak, for example, and we want to have those nuts drop, and we now are going to attract bears. So when we go access this space, how are we going to access the space safely? Are we going to put pigs in there, for example, and have some agricultural crop in there? Are we conserving turkey, for example, and they need a different kind of forest than a mature forest, and we might timber the forest in order to get it reset into a space that will accept the turkey, and it'll have a breeding habitat for deer. Again, once you have a paper plan, any reputable forest mulcher, logger, forester, land management company can give you a quote. Okay, then you'll know exactly how much it'll cost. Now, again, if you get all this plan together and they're like, it's going to be $55,000 and your budget is $55, then you can, of course, simply get out there and just start making walking trails. Now, when we go and look at the LiDAR and we go and look at the terrain and we look at all that stuff using Google Maps and using all kinds of software, we can see where there's wet spots on the ground. We can do a lot today. It's pretty amazing. If it costs too much, there's always a way you can start enjoying that land. However, if you are worried about how much it's going to cost, then it tells me you don't have a plan. You need to have that plan because, again, every terrain is different. Now, when you're going to hire somebody, and I'll wrap up with this, is that we're looking for somebody who's willing to come out and walk the land with you. So you have a plan. You know what your perimeters are. You've already got surveyed and everything like that. And then you start walking the land yourself. Then you bring a contractor out here and you walk the land. They're going to walk the land with you. They're going to be looking for markers on trees and lines and stuff. I used just spray paint. So green was trails that were 13 feet wide. Orange was roads that were 22 feet wide. And there were places where we're only just as wide as the equipment. And so the equipment in this case was, I think, 6 foot wide. I like to make it so they can drive one way down, turn around and come back the other way so that they get a brush. A lot of these guys want to chip everything to nothing. I was okay with them just pushing stuff over because we're harvesting firewood and the trails they're meant to be rough trails because I want we're inoculating with mushrooms and stuff like that. But again, the operator is going to come out. They're going to walk the land. They're going to look at your written plan and they're going to give you a price. They might be $1,000 a day. They might be $20,000 a day. They might be whatever they're going to be. But you're going to know because that operator will give you feedback and they'll give you ideas. Now, there are operators out there that are cheap. that are like $500 a day, and they'll take their equipment out. You can't operate equipment for $500 a day, and they'll run that equipment down, and they'll clear off a slope, for example. I've seen in my area guys that'll clear off a slope around here, and then within 6 months you'll see erosion because that shrub and that brush and that grass and everything that is habitat was actually keeping that hill in place. So again, written plan, we can help you with that. www.prosperityhomestead.org. I'm not just saying that because we have a whole bunch of videos that tell you how to write up a plan, or that we can help you as a consultant, but I'm saying it's just going to save you a lot of time, because that written plan is going to get you more detail about price than anything else. I've had so we have exclusion areas on the last piece of property that we forest mulched, because if you have a contour at the top of a hill, why send an excavator down a hill? Doesn't make any sense. If you can't draw a contour line all the way through your property back and make a big giant loop, then there's something wrong with the property is going to require earthworks or excavation. And so you're not just looking at a forest mulcher now. Now you're looking at a forest mulcher, an excavator, and a bulldozer. So again, we can tell a lot of these things by the satellite images. So if you'd like to talk about this, it's a very small investment to get on the video conference call, bring up all the technology, and look at your piece of land. Okay, you can visit www.prosperityhomestead.org. Contact any permaculture design consultant, and they can start talking to you about, if you're talking about a permaculture project. I've had conservation biologists come out if you're talking about just general conservation. And then there's foresters that'll come out and look at your stuff. But they're all going to treat you better and give you better prices if you have a written plan. The written plan doesn't have to be elaborate. It just has to be done. And again, so if you're looking to do what we're doing, and the reason the stuff that I'm doing works out so well is because we had a written plan. If you're looking to do what I've done, or to do what I've shown you at other projects like Reynolds Homestead, the Pollinator Trail that's nearby here, a lot of cool places that are going to have, they're going to have trails that are going to be usable for 20 years, 20 or 30 years, minimal maintenance, beautiful aesthetics. Maybe there's a view. Maybe you got a mountain area that you can come out and get a little lookout area, and you can get that view of the mountains and have a beautiful sunset. I want you to get past just how much does it cost to clear a trail to what is the experience that you want to create? What is the legacy that you want to produce? What is the value of clearing the trail far above and beyond what it might cost you to do it? It's replaceable. Money is replaceable, but the experience and the time and the life energy of just being out in the forest or being out in nature and seeing something develop and grow over time, that's priceless. I'm Justin Hitt with Prosperity Homestead. I want to thank you for watching. And if you like this format, I'm literally just got a little iPhone out here, got some notes on the board over there. If you like this format, let me know. I'm going to try to answer some of these questions in video because I just don't. Most of the answers are more complex than an X number of dollars a day. And that's good because it gives you more control. It gives you more reach. And as we do here, we're trying to get your homestead up in 12 months or less. And the most effective and valuable way that is ecologically sound is going to make that land worth more than when you start it for. And so these are investments. These are not expenses. Let's get you started. Again, www.prosperityhomestead.org for your questions. And I'll see you in the next podcast.